On a night in 1998, a man went out to unwind after arguing with his wife. But upon returning home, he faced accusations from the police. He was suspected of being the perpetrator in a murder case. Incredibly, the case involved a young eyewitness. Her testimony seemed to point directly at the man. What is the truth? Is it the despair of an innocent person or the excuses of a killer? Next, I'll tell you this story. The fateful night, June 7th, 1998. June 7th, 1998 was a Sunday. In the early morning hours, the night in Barberton, Ohio, had not yet faded. A gentle breeze made the wind chimes ring softly. That night, 58-year-old Judith Johnson was sleeping on the sofa. She didn't sleep in her own bedroom because her beloved granddaughter, 6-year-old Brooke Sutton, was visiting. She gave the room to her granddaughter. Near dawn, the sky was still dark. In the bedroom, Brooke was awakened by a faint noise. The sound seemed to come from the living room. The little girl, curious and uneasy, gently pushed open the bedroom door. To her surprise, there was a stranger shadow in the living room. The clever child immediately sensed something was wrong. She didn't scream, but quickly closed the door softly and slipped back into bed. Tensely, she covered her head with the blanket, hoping to escape notice. However, the slight movement still alerted the intruder. The figure entered the bedroom and approached the bed. Then, Brooke lost consciousness. The horrific discovery. On the morning of June 7, around 7 a.m., sunlight streamed through the windows. Brooke slowly opened her eyes, feeling immense pain in her body. Recalling what happened, a wave of fear surged over her. She struggled to get up from the bed and started calling for her grandmother. She called repeatedly but got no response. Terrified, she worried the intruder was still in the house and didn't dare move rashly. After a while, seeing the house was silent, she cautiously wrapped herself in a bath towel. Gathering her courage, she opened the door. The scene in the living room petrified Brooke. Her grandmother lay motionless on the sofa, her face pale. The room was in disarray, clearly the site of a violent struggle. She rushed forward, calling and shaking her grandmother, but she soon realized her grandmother was gone. Brooke burst into tears. She wanted to call for help, but couldn't remember the home phone number. Fortunately, her grandmother had a habit of writing phone numbers in a notebook. Brooke dialed the first number, but no one answered. It went to voicemail. She left a message. "I'm so sorry to tell you this, but my grandmother has passed away. I need someone to help find my mom. I'm here alone, and I'm scared. Can someone come with me? Please come quickly if you get this message." After the call, Brooke stumbled out of her grandmother's house to seek help. She knocked on a neighbor's door. The woman who answered was Tonya Brazil. Upon learning of Brooke's situation, the neighbor took the girl to her parents' home. Reporting to the police an initial investigation. Brooke's parents were still asleep when urgent knocking woke them. The mother opened the door and, seeing her daughter covered in injuries, quickly brought her inside. She anxiously asked what had happened. Brooke broke down in sobs. Once she calmed down a bit, she recounted the terrifying events at her grandmother's house. Shocked, the mother urged her husband to call the police. The police arrived at the girl's grandmother's home promptly. It was a single-story house with a gray roof and white walls, a lawn in front. Entering, they saw the victim, Judith, lying on the living room sofa. Her clothes were disheveled, and she showed no signs of life. The living room was chaotic, items scattered on the floor indicating a fight. No crime tools were found at the scene. Examination revealed Judith had multiple injuries and had passed away. The medical examiner's report: she was assaulted and died from asphyxiation. Time of death: between 2:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. that day. The police questioned the only eyewitness, Brooke. She recalled hearing noise from the living room while in the bedroom that early morning. Getting up to check, she saw a tall man. Then she was assaulted and passed out. Due to the dim lighting, she didn't see the intruder's face clearly, but she thought the person looked like her uncle, Clarence Elkins. The victim and her family. The victim, Judith Johnson, was 58 years old with 2 daughters. The elder daughter, Melinda, lived with her husband in Magnolia. The younger daughter had married and moved out. Judith had 2 marriages, both ending in divorce. She lived alone in the house where the crime occurred, enjoying a peaceful life. Her daughters visited occasionally. She doted on her granddaughter Brooke, so the younger daughter often sent Brooke to stay with her. Tragically, the grandmother and granddaughter suffered this calamity. Suspect Clarence Elkins. Upon learning this, the police went to Magnolia, about 30 miles away, to question Brooke's uncle. Meanwhile, Judith's elder daughter, Melinda, received the devastating news. She called her husband, Clarence, to prepare to return to her mother's home. As the couple was about to leave, several police cars stopped at their door. Dozens of officers surrounded them, leaving the couple bewildered. The police first pulled Melinda aside. Upon learning her mother had died, she was grief-stricken. Then, the police's next words horrified her even more. They said her husband, Clarence, was a major suspect. They hoped Melinda would cooperate with the investigation. Melinda insisted that her husband Clarence was not the one who harmed her mother. At the time of the incident, he was sleeping at home and hadn't left, lacking the opportunity to commit the crime. She knew her husband well. He couldn't do something so horrific. Clarence also firmly denied involvement, saying the police must be mistaken. He had a harmonious relationship with his mother-in-law and no reason to harm her. He had just learned of the tragedy. Clarence grew increasingly agitated, repeatedly emphasizing he hadn't harmed his mother-in-law. The police restrained Clarence to prevent any extreme actions. They searched the couple's home but found no evidence related to the crime. Seeing the situation turning unfavorable, Melinda proactively provided a clue. That evening, she and her husband had argued over trivial matters. In anger, her husband left the house and went to a nearby bar to drink. He returned around 2:40 a.m. By then, both had calmed down. Her husband apologized first. She realized her attitude had been poor. They sat in the living room, talking calmly, and eventually reconciled. Reasons for suspecting Clarence. Despite this, the police still considered Clarence a major suspect. He could have left again after returning home. Melinda might be covering for her husband. Initially, she said he was sleeping at home, then mentioned the bar. Very suspicious. Moreover, the little girl saw the perpetrator and said he looked like Clarence. She was only 6 and had endured such terror. She had no reason to lie. Ultimately, despite Melinda's protests, the police arrested Clarence on first-degree murder charges. Clarence and Melinda were high school classmates, the same age. They married after graduating high school. Her mother-in-law, Judith, always opposed their marriage. She often criticized Clarence in front of her daughter, viewing him as irresponsible, hoping her daughter would wake up and leave him soon. At first, Melinda dismissed her mother's words, thinking they stemmed from her own failed marriages. Judith had endured 2 violent marriages. One time, she was beaten severely, resulting in permanent disability, complete blindness in her right eye, and partial vision in her left, requiring glasses. These experiences made Judith distrustful of marriage. She often told her daughters, "You two are kind girls. You're beautiful. Don't live like I did." Over time, Melinda felt her husband wasn't as attentive as before, especially after having 2 sons. He often came home late. Melinda felt lonely and disappointed, but endured for the children. The couple frequently argued. Suspected motive. The police suspected Clarence mainly because he harbored strong resentment toward his mother-in-law, Judith. On the surface, they maintained harmony, but their relationship was tense. Clarence blamed his marital conflicts on his mother-in-law. The police speculated on the events. That evening, Clarence argued with his wife and went to the bar in anger to get drunk. The more he thought, the angrier he became, believing his wife was influenced by her mother to quarrel with him. Thus, a dark idea formed. At 2:40 a.m., Clarence returned home, pretending to apologize to his wife. Once she was asleep, he drove to his mother-in-law's house to commit the crime. Unexpectedly, Brooke was staying there. Fearing exposure, he intended to harm Brooke. Fortunately, she only fainted and woke up at dawn. From the map, the crime scene is here, and Clarence's home in Magnolia is about 30 miles away, a 40-minute drive. Judith died between 2:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. Clarence had time to wait for his wife to sleep, drive to the scene, commit the act, and return. His wife might have been sound asleep and not noticed his absence. Melinda's rebuttal. Melinda vehemently denied the speculation. That early morning, after her husband returned from the bar and they reconciled, she didn't go back to the bedroom to sleep. Instead, she slept on the living room sofa because their young son had a fever. She was worried he might cry uncomfortably at night, so she kept him on the sofa. Her husband slept alone in the bedroom. If her husband left at night, he would have to pass through the living room. She was a light sleeper and would definitely hear the door opening, but that night she heard nothing. Additionally, her husband's car was parked right outside the living room window. Starting the car would make noise she would hear, but it didn't happen. After her husband was arrested, Melinda continued to support him. She believed 100% in his innocence. She approached Brooke to ask, but the answer was the same as before. It looked like her uncle. This left Melinda in despair. Clarence, 35 years old, was an honest and dutiful man. Although influenced by her mother, she often quarreled with him, but he always took the initiative to make amends and never acted excessively. In Melinda's eyes, her husband could never commit such a heinous act. Melinda secretly resolved to clarify the matter, find the real killer who harmed her mother, and clear her husband's name. Pressure from the community and family. In the following days, she closely followed the investigation's progress and actively communicated with the police. Barberton rarely saw such vicious cases, and the police force was limited. They assigned only 2 officers to investigate. Moreover, they had already convinced themselves that Clarence was the culprit. The news of Judith's murder spread like wildfire locally. People discussed it fervently. Because Melinda steadfastly believed in her husband's innocence, she was once accused of being unwilling to seek justice for her mother. People cast strange looks at her, adding immense pressure. Brooke underwent a medical examination at the hospital. The results showed she had been sexually assaulted. This devastated her parents, who vented all their anger on Clarence, viewing him as the perpetrator. They also saw Melinda as an accomplice. Brooke's mother told the police that Clarence had a poor relationship with her mother, Judith. They disliked each other. He was the most likely person to harm her mother. She hoped the police would bring Clarence to justice. He was simply a beast. After his arrest, Clarence consistently denied the charges. He admitted to minor conflicts with his mother-in-law, but nothing warranting murder. The perpetrator's methods were cruel. As an ordinary person, he lacked the audacity. Moreover, he treated Brooke like his own daughter and would never harm her in that way. The trial and verdict. Before the trial, the defense attorney told Melinda that although the situation was grim, the police had no direct evidence proving Clarence was at the crime scene. Their only evidence was the testimony of 6-year-old Brooke. Moreover, she only said the person looked like her uncle, not 100% certain. The lawyer's words boosted Melinda's confidence. 11 months after the incident, the case went to trial in the local court. Defendant Clarence Elkins was charged with first-degree murder and other crimes. In court, the prosecution portrayed defendant Clarence as a selfish, violent man. He killed his mother-in-law due to their strained relationship and attempted to harm young Brooke. Fortunately, she only sustained injuries and fainted. Her testimony was the strongest evidence. The defense argued there was no evidence showing the defendant was at the crime scene. The medical examiner found no traces belonging to the defendant on the victim. Eyewitness Brooke was young, in extreme fear, and the room was dimly lit. She couldn't see clearly. It might just be a coincidence that Clarence resembled the perpetrator. The judge asked Brooke on the witness stand if she saw the person who harmed her grandmother. She paused silently and said yes. Then, she pointed at Clarence on the defendant's seat. Brooks' firm response caused an uproar in the courtroom. The defense attorney was stunned. In people's minds, a 6-year-old girl wouldn't lie. Thus, this evidence heavily favored the prosecution. After deliberation, the jury, despite no direct evidence, reached a unanimous decision. The court sentenced defendant Clarence Elkins to life imprisonment for first-degree murder and other charges. Melinda became the center of attention. She was scorned by the public and media. Even walking on the street, people gave her odd looks. While worrying about her husband, she had to care for their 2 sons alone, leaving her physically and mentally exhausted. But Melinda didn't give up. Instead, she made a bold decision: quit her job to focus on investigating the case. She was determined to uncover the truth. She went to her mother's grave and vowed to find the real killer, even if it took her entire life. Melinda took action. With no experience in investigations, she bought many books on crime and watched crime TV shows to learn detection methods. She learned about DNA technology. To find her mother's killer, she needed to rely on this technique. She compiled a list of suspects, including all people who had contact with her mother and had violent tendencies. She found ways to approach them and obtain their DNA samples. Melinda spared no expense, frequenting bars and even chatting with strange men. She stored the collected samples in her home refrigerator. Gradually, the fridge filled with samples. Assistance from an expert. Although the samples piled up, Melinda was stumped on what to do next. Fortunately, she learned of an organization called Truth and Justice. It specialized in investigating and exposing hidden truths to seek justice for victims. Melinda wrote a letter seeking help and received a response. The organization said a detective named Martin Yant could assist her. Yant was a veteran journalist who later became a detective, renowned for his case-solving abilities. Melinda contacted him. After understanding the details, Yant agreed to take the case. One reason Yant agreed was that he was moved by Melinda's sincerity. She not only wanted to clear her husband, but also to find her mother's killer. Such courage and determination touched Yant. Yant traveled from Columbus to Barberton to meet Melinda. The two reviewed the case from beginning to end. Finally, Yant concluded that the case had major issues. The police had pegged Clarence as the killer from the start without thorough investigation. Relying solely on Brooks' testimony was too hasty. Challenges with DNA. Melinda had collected a fridge full of DNA samples. Testing them one by one would cost a fortune. Unemployed, she couldn't afford it. Yant didn't approve of this approach either. Through channels, he obtained the investigation report. Yant keenly noticed a key clue. On the front door frame at the crime scene, there was a bloody fingerprint, likely left by the killer when leaving. But the report didn't mention if that fingerprint belonged to Clarence. Melinda immediately requested to test the fingerprint, but was denied. The response? The fingerprint was damaged during earlier extraction and couldn't be analyzed further. This left Melinda deeply disappointed. New discoveries at the scene. Yant believed the crime scene might have other clues. He asked Melinda to search there carefully. Indeed, They found something. Digging in the front lawn revealed a suspicious large pair of pliers, possibly buried by the killer. Additionally, nearby, they discovered the remains of a missing pet cat and other suspicious items. These indicated the killer's cruelty. Yant obtained the court trial records. After careful analysis, he found the key figure was still Brooke. Initially, she only said the person looked like her uncle, but in court, she insisted it was her uncle. There must be a reason. Yant assigned Melinda another task: talk to Brooke. But contacting Brooke required her sister's consent. Since their mother's death, the sisters had cut contact for 3 whole years. But to find the real killer, Melinda was willing to repair the relationship. Despite her anxiety and unease, she approached her sister. Surprisingly, upon seeing Melinda, her sister hugged her tightly. The sisters embraced and cried, reconciling. The sister said over the years she had wanted to call her sister countless times, but couldn't muster the courage. Fortunately, her sister didn't hold grudges. They truly loved each other. Melinda explained the purpose of her visit. She then met Brooke, now 9 years old. Faced with her aunt's questions, Brooke's emotions broke down and she cried. She said she wasn't actually sure if the person she saw that day was her uncle. But the police told her they had substantial evidence that her uncle was the one who hurt her. If she said the person she saw was him, they could lock him up. At 6 years old, Brooke believed them and identified her uncle in court. But as she grew older, her memory became clearer. She remembered the person had brown eyes, while her uncle's eyes were blue. Clearly, they weren't the same person. Brooke's words shocked Melinda. Although she had long believed her husband was wronged, hearing it directly from Brooke still left her unsettled for a long time. She knew the tasks ahead were still arduous. To exonerate her husband, the best way was to find the real killer. So, who was the killer? Suspect Rob Rash. Yant learned the victim had attended a friend's daughter's wedding. Perhaps clues could be found in the video. Melinda contacted her mother's friend and obtained the videotape. After repeated viewings, a man at the wedding paid extra attention to her mother. His gaze lingered on her. This person was Rob Rash, who had been a fervent suitor of Judith. He had asked her out multiple times, but was rejected. Melinda recalled that Rash had appeared at her mother's funeral. From the funeral video, he looked tense, with scratch marks on his face. Yant and Melinda went to Rash's workplace to question him. Rash seemed restless and admitted he had liked Judith, but wouldn't do anything harmful to her. Melinda doubted his words because he avoided eye contact, appearing guilty. Moreover, Rash refused to provide a DNA sample, heightening her suspicions. Petition for DNA collection. Following Yant's suggestion, Melinda applied to the court to compel collection of Rash's DNA sample. She also submitted a video where Brooke retracted her previous testimony, admitting she misidentified and that Clarence was innocent. The media paid attention to the case. Unlike before, this time the media sided with Melinda. Under public opinion pressure, the court approved collecting Rash's DNA sample. They also provided the killer's DNA sample from the crime scene. 6 years after the incident, Melinda paid out of pocket to send Rash's sample, Clarence's sample, and the killer's sample to a crime lab. The results showed Clarence's sample didn't match the killer's, proving he wasn't the perpetrator. This made Melinda overjoyed, but she also learned Rash's sample didn't match either. The killer was someone else. Suspect, Earl Maughan. Although the evidence wasn't sufficient yet, Melinda didn't give up. She re-examined her previous suspect list. One named Earl Maughan caught her attention. Notably, when Melinda collected DNA samples earlier, Mann was imprisoned for other crimes, so she hadn't obtained his. But at the time of the crime, he was free and had the opportunity. Most importantly, he had numerous criminal records. From the map, the victim's home was only about 65 feet from Mann's home. Thus, he was a suspect. Melinda informed her sister of this discovery. Then, a chilling detail emerged. After the incident, Brooke ran to the neighbors for help and knocked on Mann's door. The one who opened was Mann's wife, Tonya Brazil. Seeing Brooke disheveled, she neither went to the crime scene nor called the police immediately. Instead, she made the girl wait at the door for about an hour. Tonya then took Brooke home. Looking back, it's terrifying. Fortunately, Brooke didn't enter the house. The consequences would be unimaginable. Luckily, he didn't harm Brooke further, but sent her home and left quietly. Obtaining Mann's DNA. In 2005, Melinda wanted to collect Mann's DNA sample, but he was in prison. This posed a challenge. After inquiries, Melinda was surprised to find Mann was incarcerated in the same prison as her husband, Clarence. Melinda posed as a pen pal and wrote to Mann, hoping he would lick the stamp on a reply to get DNA. But this method failed. Mann didn't respond. Undeterred, Melinda told her husband Clarence about it. In the following days, Clarence began observing Mann's every move in prison. His efforts paid off. He discovered Mann had a smoking habit. One chance opportunity, Clarence saw Mann discard a cigarette butt in the ashtray after smoking. He quickly picked it up when unnoticed, wrapped it in clean paper, and mailed it to Melinda. The results and the truth. Upon receiving the sample, Melinda rushed it to the lab for testing. The results shocked everyone. Mann's DNA perfectly matched the DNA left at the crime scene. At last, the real killer surfaced. Earl Mann was 35 years old then. He was 28 at the time of the crime. Born in Florida, he later moved with his wife to Barberton, Ohio. The couple had 3 daughters. When Brooke visited her grandmother, she often played with the 3 girls. Mann had a spotted record with numerous crimes. In 2002, he was imprisoned for offenses against his own daughter. Notably, his eyes were brown, matching Brooke's memory of the killer's eye color. After Mann was identified as the new suspect, his wife, Tonya Brazil, was questioned by police. She said that on the night of the crime, her husband returned home in the early morning. She noticed many scratch marks on his back and asked about them, but her husband impatiently said it was from being with some wild woman. Her husband was irritable and often abusive. Tanya didn't dare ask more and let it go. In the morning, hearing the knock, she saw young Brooke at the door. She wanted to let her in, but her husband scolded her, so the girl waited outside. Seeing this, Tanya suspected her husband was involved but feared reporting it. She could only take the poor Brooke home and then leave quietly. As for why her husband harmed Judith, she wasn't sure. Perhaps he targeted her belongings, was caught stealing, and then killed her. That day, Melinda brought their 2 sons to wait outside the prison early. A crowd of reporters gathered. When Clarence walked out the prison gates, Melinda rushed forward and hugged him tightly, tears streaming down. The 2 sons excitedly jumped into their father's arms, unwilling to let go. Facing the reporters, Clarence smiled and said, "Today is a day of rebirth for me. Thanks to my wife. It's because of her that I'm standing here." After his release, Clarence received $1.075 million in compensation. He then sued the Barberton police and reached a settlement for an additional $5.25 million. The culprit's fate and legacy. 10 years after the incident, suspect Earl Mann reached a plea deal. Melinda discovered the large pliers as the crime tool. As for the motive, he didn't reveal it. The court sentenced Mann to life imprisonment with no parole for 55 years. Combined with previous sentences, he would be at least 90 before any parole chance. Thereafter, Melinda worked to promote the passage of post-conviction DNA laws in Ohio. The bill specified regulations for DNA testing after conviction. In addition, Melinda gave speeches at universities and other places, sharing her story to fight for justice for more wrongfully convicted people. Regrettably, after all the hardships, Clarence and Melinda's marriage came to an end. The reason? Some family members still doubted Clarence's innocence. They couldn't accept him fully. Internal family conflicts made it hard for the couple to maintain their former feelings. After deep consideration, they chose to part amicably, each forming new families and starting new lives.